Okay, hi guys. Today we're going to talk about the religion of Hyperborean, Pythagorean Illuminism, which can just be called Hyperboreanism or Illuminism or even Pythagoreanism on their own. We almost need a better name for this. The metaphysical theory of everything, which is also a metaphysical theory of everything, just as any religion generally is, right? This one in particular is a religion of racial excellence for white people, but it has a special property which gives it a justification unlike any other religion has. And plus we're going to cover some of the latest Earth info which I have received through special channels, and that's actually really exciting and really kind of mind-blowing actually. So let's work our way there. So let's go. So what is metaphysics anyway? What do we mean by that? It's a division of philosophy that is concerned with the fundamental nature of reality and being, and that includes ontology. What does that mean? What's ontology? Ontology is a branch of metaphysics concerned with nature and relations of being. Metaphysics and ontology comprise the philosophical and scientific study of that which fundamentally exists as the basis of reality. So this is like theory of everything stuff. This is like, what is existence itself made out of? Like, what is the whole structure of what exists here? And of course, religions generally try to answer that. Generally, religions don't have a mathematical or scientific approach to that. They call everything God. They call everything spirit. And these are just labels for some concept of whatever it is, but it must be infinite in being or very large, and it must be some sort of self-existent thing, right? And we use phrases and words for that in other religions, like God or being, or, I think the Hindus call it Brahman, and the Buddhists have some other name for it, right? So in Pythagoreanism, we actually have a mathematical definition for these things and can actually prove what they actually mean instead of just using mystical sounding words that are meant to convey a sort of emotional or profound concept in our mind, right? So Hyperboreanism is an idealist in metaphysics and ontology. What does that mean? That means that existence is fundamentally a structure of mind, but that's just saying spirit or mind or thinking or thought or soul, which is, just like what any other religion would basically say about what is fundamental reality. If it's Christian, then, fundamental reality is an emanation. It comes from God. God has created it. Well, therefore, everything as a creation of God is then, couched within God itself, right? Some aspect of what God can create, right? But we define what is actually meant by that in Hyperboreanism. So, of course, this idealist idea that everything is a structure of mind, that comes from, it doesn't come from, but Descartes sort of defined it well when he said, I think, therefore I am, only mind can know, therefore mind is all. And that's consistent with basically a lot of philosophy going all the way back to the Greeks and probably even the Egyptians. And, of course, consistent with most religions as well. However, Pythagoreanism, Illuminism, Hyperboreanism is based on mathematics and mathematically proves its position and justifies its position. That's what's unique about it, right? Because I think most people would recognize that mathematical proof, mathematical justification for things really provides a rational and logical basis. Like if you just use the word God, but you don't define what that means, it's, well, okay, then you're going to have faith in it, right? We can actually define what is meant by God and spirit and soul and all that, and it's no longer just a matter of, okay, well, I'm going to have to take that on faith. Now it's, wow, now it's like, wow, I really know that spirit, soul, what we want to call God, is a real actual thing and has actual real mathematical proof and justification. And some people might think, well, I really like having faith, but faith isn't a necessary feature of religion. If you can know, of course, most people in religion would go beyond faith, and they would say, well, I don't just arbitrarily have faith. I know that God exists. So, they do that because they have, their justification in their feelings or whatever mystical experiences they've had. We use logic and rationality and mathematics to really prove it, right? Because obviously the faith argument, that just, it's an endless debate where people can always just criticize. in the end, you're just believing in something without proof, right? And they're like, yes, but I know that is the right thing to do. It's like, okay, great. Well, I know that is wrong, right? So that's just an argument that goes nowhere, right? So once you have a mathematical proof, it's like, okay, but can you refute that 2 + 2 = 4? Like, nobody can actually do that. So once you have a mathematical proof, people can't really just say, well, I have a different opinion than you. I mean, they can say that, but then they're really just going to arbitrary belief, and you can prove it. You know what I mean? That's what they're doing, and you can just discount them. And of course, that's what a lot of people don't like about Hyperboreanism, is that we do have mathematical proof, because a lot of people don't actually seem to want to know and have proof for spirit and the nature of their soul, and that their soul is a real thing, and that they exist as a soul, you know? In any case, yeah, so see Illuminism. So my book on Amazon, I'm slowly but surely working on a second edition. And so that's a big wall of text here. So what are we talking about? I mean, already we're getting far beyond what most people are concerned about in their day-to-day life. So, what is it? What are you talking about? Hyperboreanism, Illuminism, a religion for white people, which comes from the European intellectual tradition of philosophy and mathematics, and even including science, which promotes, and most importantly, promotes racial excellence for white people with mathematical proof for doing so, and for basically all of its positions, including the soul, that you have a soul, that you are a soul, and it's not that you have a soul. Using that sort of terminology kind of splits you from yourself. It's a bit schizophrenic. It's a bit of a strange statement, and using that term frequently might separate you from yourself in some strange way, right? So it's not that you have a soul, you are a soul. The self-awareness unit that is you, that's you as soul. And what you have is a body. It's not that your body has a soul. I mean, you can say that your body has a soul, but then you're identifying with your material body then. You're not your material body. You as the self-awareness unit, that is what the soul is. That is what the mind is. And what you have is a body, temporarily, right, in space-time. So, simplified maximally, it's a religion for white people, based on the white people's European intellectual tradition of philosophy and mathematics, going all the way back to the Greeks, and probably with connections to even the Egyptians as well, although the connections are maybe not as clear. But I just bring that up because of the mathematical properties of the pyramids and things. Anyway, it seems pretty clear that there's some Egyptian connection as well there too. So it goes very far back in time, and there's a whole sequence of the development of philosophy, you know, especially formally with the Greeks developing philosophy. And then, of course, there was a period where it was suppressed and a lot of writing was lost. And then, you know, it started to resurface in Renaissance Europe and during the Enlightenment period, and bringing an end to the Dark Ages, basically around the 1400s, and then especially into the 1500s, right? People rediscovered Greek philosophy, and that sort of regenerated the whole exploration. And then finally, with Leibniz, it was all sort of formalized, and now it's really formalized. So Pythagorean metaphysics. So we're defining everything as thought, right? So in the book Illuminism, I explain why this is the equation for thought, right? So if we're saying that everything is thought, and of course, you know, in most religions, right, they'll say everything is spirit, everything is soul, but they don't have a definition for it, right? So we have a definition for what we mean by existence as a structure of mind, meaning a structure of soul, a structure of spirit, right? We can define with sufficient justification, with sufficient reason, and we can justify why thought should be structured as this equation, right? And so that's in the book Illuminism as to why it would be so. And so basically you just have different frequencies being different thoughts. And so different frequencies have different radii, and they produce these waves. And this connects to, you know, basically this is the origin of the wave theory of quantum mechanics. This is why quantum mechanics, which is the modern scientific analysis, you know, completely obviously devoid of religious concepts, right, from traditional modern science, right? Nevertheless, the basis of quantum mechanics, which is the modern theory of everything, basically studying existence at its most fundamental level, has discovered that existence is a wave equation. Well, the wave equation, but it's never justified, obviously, in modern science. They state that's what is, but why it should be that in the first place is not answered. It's just a brute contingent. Okay, we've discovered that everything is a wave equation in quantum mechanics. This is how it works. And then we do our science and our empiricism with that. So in metaphysics, in Pythagoreanism, Hyperboreanism, right, we're going the step beyond that and justifying this is why existence manifests as a wave equation, because existence is made out of thoughts, and thoughts can be defined or must be defined as this structure for reasons which you can read about in that book, Illuminism. And this structure, wow, just so happens to manifest waves as the basis of reality. And so therefore that is the connection, that's the bridge between religion, essentially, and modern physics, modern science. So really neat, right? So yeah, just basic thoughts, and then a monad. So what is your soul then? So your soul, which we call monad, is a collection of all possible thoughts. That's what your monad is, your soul is. So there's just 3 circles, 3 different frequencies, showing how these circles create, these 3 different waves. So here's just more. I think there's 17 here, just showing. And so you just, in your head, just extrapolate that. There's actually a very large number, almost an infinite number, just a very, very, very large number of frequencies which make up your whole soul. And so that's what R is. R is the radius, which gives the frequency. And then it's this phi term here, this phase term, which actually gives each of our souls uniqueness. So we can explain that souls exist as a structure of thought, as a structure of spirit, right? Independent of matter. It's something that exists independent of matter. So we die, and that's common to almost all religious traditions, right? We die, we leave our body. Our body is not something we take with us, right? And we exist as a form of thought and spirit. So that's what this is describing. These equations describe how that exists and how that can actually happen, right? And then it has this term, this phase term, which explains how our souls and our minds are all unique, right? So we all have these unique terms, these phase terms, which give us our own perceptions, our own unique individuality and perceptions of how we perceive each thought, right? So we're going to get that back into this in a moment here. And then finally, we have an equation which can describe all souls, and all souls taken together. You can call that God, if you like, and that is just capital M monad, or the grand monad sometimes, and it's just the union of, so here your soul is a union of all possible frequencies, and then the grand monad is the union of all possible monads, little monads, souls of all possible frequencies, right? And that is the great grand structure. So we have mathematical justification for the concept of the soul, for the concept of God, and for justification that everything is made out of mind, out of what must reduce to thought and thinking. And from that, we explain the basic features of modern physics, which is that existence appears to be a wave equation, right? And our soul, or our thoughts, our mind, our thinking, is fundamentally structured as a wave equation. So it's just kind of uniting everything together now, uniting religion with what we know from modern science now. So how cool is that? Really great, right? If you just want a color-coded scheme for that, just as a way to think of your soul, or you as soul, or what it might look like. So here's just, a few frequencies. So the smaller size radii thoughts spin really fast. The large radii thoughts go around much slower, but they're all going at the same linear speed, and that produces the different frequencies. Anyway, if you want to color code that, so it would just look like this, right? The lowest frequencies are red, the highest frequencies are blue, and so you just color code it then to the visual spectrum for humans, right? Highest frequency being purple or indigo, and the lowest frequency being red. So that's just a basic way of looking at having a picture in your mind for what your soul looks like in an abstract, sort of just converting the mathematics to the mathematics of your soul and how it's structured to just an object you could think of. So it's totally fine to think of your soul as a sort of disk that looks like this. You know, it's not that it's physical, it's abstract, but it gives a way for your human mind to take that abstraction and translate it to a sort of physical representation, right? Okay, so soul. So this is the most beautiful metaphysical position ever created. Why? Because it has mathematical proof and justification for every one of its positions. It's not fundamentally contradictory to any other religious system out there, which is based on soul and spirit and all that, and the independence of the ability to soul, or the ability of the soul to exist independently of matter. So it's not different from that. It's actually exactly in line with almost any other religious tradition. It's just that we now have mathematical proof for it and can explain it all mathematically. And again, in my book Illuminism, if you would like to read a very brief, very compressed summary, I'm going to expand it a little bit in the second edition. So the circling, what we call the circling, this first thing, which is an individual thought, has sufficient reason for its existence, and nothing exhibiting something. Yeah, that's right. We can explain why something comes from nothing, why existence can exist in the first place. I mean, wow, that's a pretty big deal, right? And it's self-perceiving thought. So then the monad, or your soul, follows from the infinity multiplier and constitutes a complete being as a soul, called the monad, as you. The grand monad follows also from the infinity multiplier and gives you and all of us a whole universe and God. So that's pretty cool. All via the principle of sufficient reason, all justified with logic, and all justified and proven with mathematics. So it gives you your soul, which is you yourself, right? It gives you other types of souls, angels, demons, aliens. Just to comment on that, you know, obviously, if you have ever studied this sort of concept, a lot of people have always wondered, I mean, in occultism, this is a big deal. What exactly is an angel and what exactly is a demon? One interesting concept is that the demons, what we call demons now, were actually Earth's original, quote-unquote, angels. Helper beings, higher level helper beings that help souls like us progress, engage in the progression from being lowly developed to higher developed, right? To become more like God, right? And because the term demon just comes from, it's a Greek word, right? Called daemon. It used to be spelled D-A-E-M-O-N, right? Daemon. And it just means helper. And it seems that what we now call angels, I mean, possibly according to some theories, is some sort of invasionary force which cast down the original demons to some lower frequency level, and made them be unable to help and unable to engage anymore, and so put them in a really bad position of some sort. And yeah, it might relate to aliens, or what you could call alien mental groups, mind groups that exist in this grand monad structure. So anyway, that's just a neat concept. It's just out there a lot. That term demon has a lot of charge with it as being a negative thing, but it seems like that might be what happened. I don't know why I'm bringing that up. It's just an interesting concept. So it gives you evolution, which I'll explain in a moment. It gives you a contingent temporary universe, right? Existing in a larger eternal structure. Now I said, right, so why is that a big deal? It's because for modern science, it seems pretty well established that the universe itself started 13 or so billion years ago. And so the question is, well, why did that happen? Where did that come from? And how could that come from nothing? And so the math, you can actually show in the math, and I don't explain it. I won't get into it here, and maybe in my book I'll expand that section in the second edition to explain how you have a universe that appears to be 13.7 billion years old, but these equations are actually eternal and is always true. So anyway, basically you have universe after universe. It's a cyclic model. Where this structure is eternal because it's self-existent. And if it's self-existent, that means that it can never have been created. It's just always existed. And you can prove why that must be so. And I discuss that in the book. But then you have contingent, which just means temporary or created universes within this structure. So this structure can create universes. And then what's the purpose of that? Well, souls go into it. So anyway, souls go into those universes to experience certain things. So it gives you reincarnation and transcendence, because our souls then keep reincarnating in that universe until some process is finished. I'm always going to talk about this know-how, so that know-how was cueing me to talk about the transcendence part and sort of how to do that. I don't think I will cover that. I mean, it's known. I know how to do it. I could tell you what to do, and I could tell you what the process is. But I think that I will keep that just a secret for now. And then, because you have to be very careful. So, there is historic precedent here. The idea of the Holy Grail, the idea of transforming yourself into a higher being. It's dangerous because you could transform yourself into a very evil being that has access to powers which just make you a very nasty parasite. So we don't want that to happen, obviously. So there's some mythos and some lore that you can generate out of this structure too, which is all very interesting and connects with history. And then it gives the actual physics too. Yeah, as I discussed previously, base existence, base metaphysical existence is basically made out of waves, and modern science, through quantum mechanics, takes a look at the basic behavior of particles and the basic behavior of energy and says, oh wow, it looks like it's all waves. They can't explain why, we can explain why, right? So, pretty cool. So, soul becoming, or soul evolution. So here's the basic equation for a soul, little m monad. And so the idea here, then, is that each frequency R, and these are just arbitrary units, just going from 0 to 1, but it would really be from 1 to, the first frequency to some very large frequency. But anyway, you have thought phase. Phase is a function of frequency, right? So thought phase is a function of thought frequency is how you could order this in order to look at it. And basically the idea is that at the beginning of the universe, all of our souls become scrambled, and the process of evolution is descrambling our phases. So you can see that's happening here. So if that's the start right there. We have a very scrambled looking function here, very noisy. And the process of evolution is we are solving basically ourselves to become more rational, more perfect, more godlike, more excellent, more perfected. And then at the end of the process of living in a universe, you go from a messy phi as a function of R to a nice constant one. So the Big Bang scrambles the soul's phases, making them all not in phase. You can liken it to it like skiing down a mountain. So at the end here, and then boom, you reset, and it's like you release all that energy, right? You made it to the top of the hill, and then you ski back down, you release all that energy, right? And so, and then you got to walk back up. You got to basically walk back up that hill, climb back up that hill, realigning your phases, and that's a lot of work to do. Like when I was a kid on a farm, we had hills, and I was getting into snowboarding in the 80s there, and I had to walk up the hill, and walking up the hill is a lot of hard work, and so that's what this process is. You're walking up the hill, and it's a lot of hard work, but you get to the top of the hill where you're perfected, and then you get to slide back down, and it's a whole lot of fun. So boom, that's the sliding back down part, which is a lot of fun, right? So that's a way to just sort of analogize the whole process of what your soul is doing here in the first place and why it's doing it, right? So this is the history of the universe, past lives, reincarnation, etc. The soul, you, puts itself back together, but not as Humpty Dumpty again. So you can see interesting references to, children's sort of limericks. The idea here is that over the universal lifetime, you realign all your phases, all your terms here, all your phase terms here, your phi terms, you realign them until you become perfect, but you realign at probably at a different phase compared to your previous incarnation in a universe. So you have some pretty big concepts here, right? So we're going beyond typically the story that you get from traditional religions, and we have some pretty profound concepts here. And yeah, we do have reincarnation, and then really big universal ideas as to what the purpose of your soul is, and the purpose of existence and what you're doing here, right? Generally it's about wins and losses. Generally towards wins. You can see that there's scatter, and it's a bit noisy as the evolution occurs, right? it's generally towards good, generally towards solving towards a constant phase, although there's messiness along the way, right? So you go from an equation like this, which is a messy function of phase as a function of r, to simply a constant function, a constant term for your phase, in which case you would be a perfected soul. And that would occur basically at the end of the universe. Or sooner. You can actually do it sooner. And then you would stop. Actually, yeah, and that's actually important, because you actually have access to do that now. You can become sufficiently perfected in a single lifetime that you can then stop reincarnating and retain your current consciousness and current personality, becoming totally individuated as such, and then basically achieving immortality and having then control over your future. Whereas, most people who aren't very highly developed, they have too messy of a phase, and then when they die, they lose eventually their current consciousness and current personality, and they are reincarnated and then develop a new one. And that process keeps on happening until you individuate sufficiently that you become immortal. Basically, it's the same ideas. These are all analogous ideas. It's like going to heaven, right? You're going to heaven, right? And then living forever in heaven immortally. There's a bit of nuance here, obviously, with ours. And, obviously in traditional religion, especially Christianity, I mean, if you don't be good enough, if you're not good enough, you sin sufficiently, and you can liken it to this phase term. If you die with a very nasty set of phase terms here, well, then you go to hell forever, right? So that's not good. And so people might find reincarnation distasteful, but reincarnation, at least you're not going to hell forever and living in the lake of fire, being burned forever, tortured forever, if you die with insufficiently perfected, if you have too much sin in your phases, essentially, right? You can see all these analogies you can create here. So at least reincarnation gives you an opportunity to not live in hell forever. You can eventually come back to Earth with a new personality and as a new baby, and perfect yourself. And when you do achieve gnosis and immortality, it's not that you then do remember all your past lives, and they do become part of you. And it's not that when you die, and if you do, if you do die and come back as a new personality, you might think, well, that sucks. I want to be who I am now, right? Like, I don't want to lose who I am now. I really like the idea of traditional religion where I keep who I am now, even if I'm in the lake of fire. I mean, that actually doesn't sound good, right? You want to keep who you are now, even if you go to the lake of fire forever? Probably not, right? You would want the opportunity to change and improve yourself. And so it's not that big a deal, because just think of yourself when you were 5 years old. Are you the same person as you were 5 years old? No. But do you remember the good parts of being 5 years old? And even the bad parts, if there were bad parts? Yeah, sure, you remember those. They're still part of you. So just because you die and become immortal, as if that's not going to be your current life right now and it's going to be a future life for you, the person you are now is still going to be a part of that greater soul structure, your greater soul structure, which has a record of who you were and who you are in this life, just as you right now have a record and a memory of who you were when you were 10 or 5 or even last year. You might even be different from who you were last year, but you still appreciate who you were last year, right? And you still love parts of that person and don't like parts of that person possibly, right? And so it's not that bad to say that you reincarnate and you develop a new personality, because it's a much higher level perspective, right? And it's not that different. It's not different at all from just you remembering your past right now. As a soul, you'll remember your past lives, and they'll all be part of you, and you'll love all those parts that are worth loving, and you'll be happy that you got over the parts that you didn't like about yourself. So it's not bad, right? Believing in reincarnation isn't a sad thing to believe in, if you feel, because it's just because of the impression I get sometimes from people, is that reincarnation is kind of a sad idea because you lose who you are right now. But you don't actually. You don't. And actually that's why it's an improvement, having this mathematical explanation for what the process is, because in some traditions, like I think in Hinduism, reincarnation is just random, and you could come back as a toad or something, and so that kind of sucks, because then you really just have no purpose and no identity. It's like, if you come back as a toad, what's it going to matter that you were once a human? It would just be stupid, right? But of course, those religions that say such things, they have no basis, and they really don't know what we're talking about. We've defined everything mathematically, and and we're not just defining this arbitrarily. Like, our math actually explains the structure of the universe as proven by modern physics, right? Like, this is real. This is really how it exists. This is really what exists, right? And so, there is a developmental process. You don't reincarnate to become less than what you were. Like, each reincarnation is becoming more than what you were in the past, right? And so it's a good and awesome process. And you just get better and better until eventually you become sufficiently individuated that you retain your current consciousness and current state of being. And basically, it just means you're not forced into the reincarnation system anymore, and you can start directing your future consciously, as opposed to just letting the universal natural processes, force you, quote unquote, force you back into the process, or just sweep you back up into the process of becoming, which is happening naturally. Okay, great. So then there's also then the idea of God becoming. So you have the grand monad, which is composed of all sorts of monads, which have at the beginning their own very messy phases, right? But each monad, as we just saw, solves to its own constant phase phi. And when you write it this way, you can see that souls will form phase groups. And that would be how you define planetary life templates, species and races on a planet, right? So everything is contingent. Most species die off. Most go extinct. Just in regards to Earth could, easily just not make it. Depends on white people taking Earth back. Otherwise, it's going to be slavery, degradation, extinction, because you need to have a species which is on that becoming trajectory. And so the white people really define that. If you look at our history and our philosophy and everything like that, we really define this impetus and this drive to perfect things, to make wonderful things, to make beautiful things, to be respectful towards others, to not cheat others, not scam others. I mean, yes, they do that a little bit, we do, but it's not a mass cultural phenomenon. Generally, we're driving towards making better societies and being better ourselves. And yes, of course, we're not Christian, but you can say that there were elements of Christianity which were good for that process too. So, no problem there. So God puts itself together over a whole universe's lifetime. So this is the idea of, now you have monad number, and so this would be going from 1 to a very large number, like infinity or close to infinity. And so this would be each monad. So each monad is bouncing around in its phase that its constant phase that it's trying to solve to, and eventually, you get groups of phases solving to a unique group, and then that would be how you identify a species or a race. And I'll have another slide on that in a second here. So eventually, at the very end of the universe, all monads agree on everything. It just means that their thoughts all get aligned, and we all eventually agree on everything. And so that is called the omega point, and that's at the end of the universe. And so we can actually define some pretty profound things. We can define what the beginning of the universe looks like for a soul, and we can define what the end of the universe would be. And once you reach that end, where the whole monad collective, all souls, arrive at the exact same thought, because all problems have been solved, all problems between souls, between individuals, have been solved, then you have a constant phi phase for the entire monadic collective, which would look like that across all monads. And at that point, there is truly nothing left to do besides do that whole process on a universal level, where the whole universe then, basically slides down the hill, and there's a big release of energy, creating a whole universe, right? That's the Big Bang. All that energy that we see, that must have created the whole universe. That's what that is. You're scrambling all your phases, and it must be a fun process. It must feel really good, or something analogous to sliding down the hill, right? Some people liken it to sex, possibly. which is maybe a nice way, or another way to think of it. It just feels really good doing that process, and then you got to work your way back up, which is like going to the gym. I mean, if you go to the gym and have a really good cardio session, how do you feel after the end of it? You feel really good, although it's work, and you're doing all this work, and, it's making your body sore. Afterwards, that sore body actually feels fantastic, doesn't it, right? So you can kind of liken it to those sort of ideas. So I'm going to discuss racism. So there are subgroups in the whole monadic collective, right, where generally a group of monads have similar phases, and that would be how you define species and races in planetary civilization. So pretty cool. We can mathematically define that, yes, there are such things as race. And of course, I mean, it's so stupid that we live in a modern society where we deny that race exists for humans, whereas you look at animals and it's just like species after species after species. You look at dogs and it's like dog breed after dog breed after dog breed. And even within bears, there's like this type of bear, that type of bear, that type of bear. And they can interbreed, but they're still, very unique bears, and they still have their own unique sort of behaviors. I don't know why we deny that such a thing exists among the different races of humans. So stupid, right? Anyway, now there's mathematical proof that, well, of course there is. Of course there is. It's just so stupid that we've been led to believe that there isn't different races for humans, or that it's just a construct. It's like saying that polar bears and grizzly bears are just a social construct. No, there's actually real differences. It's real. It's not just made up. So dumb. Anyway, ontological mathematics, so that's what this is called. Yeah, it's also called ontological mathematics. This religion is universal, but the entire universe and everything is contingent. So everything in the universe, all species in the universe are contingent. That means that they're not absolute, that they can come and go. And obviously on Earth, the history of Earth shows that I think it's greater than 99%, much closer to 100% of species die off, right? And so a species like humans, especially like white people, a race like white people who have the potential and who have this apparent inbuilt tendency to want to improve themselves, that's a very unique thing. And it's a very special thing. And we need to defend that and keep our people in such a state where we can keep on that progression, because that progression is eventually leading to us becoming sort of a divine species. And of course now that is some conflict with Christianity, who would call that blasphemous. Obviously the Mormons are a modern sect of Christianity, and for them, they have no problem with the concept of, and of course a lot of Christians will just say, well, the Mormons are, blasphemers or whatever. But the Mormons, if you know any, they're not that bad of people. They seem to have a version of Christianity which is totally compatible with this idea that you become, as a soul, you become better and better and better and more like God over time, right? And that's what your goal is. So anyway, in the grand monad, there will be different M-naughts, so that just means subgroups of M, just as we see on Earth with physical species and races. And then some people say, with star races too. Anyway, the point is race is real. It's not just a social construct. It's as dumb as saying that polar bears and grizzly bears are just a social construct. They're not a social construct, and I think they can interbreed too, right? But so it's just dumb. Really dumb concept that there's no such thing as race with humans. It's not a social construct. They're real differences, and the different races do not behave the same way or have the same properties. So rational racism, we've given a rational basis for racism, and racism it's been so negatively charged now, it's hard to use that word, right? So I just put rational racism to sort of lighten it or take away the negative charge that has been attached now in modern times to the word racism. Maybe we need a new term. So anyway, rational racism, pro-social racism, we have mathematical proof, mathematical justification that, there's different races of humans. And so rational racism would be you would want to maintain the virtuous qualities and pedigree of your race, respect other races as they are, and don't assume that they should be like you. That's the real big sin of white people, is in assuming that other races should be like us and that you deserve to help them. That's not good for other races. For the other races of humans to think that they need white people to help them and to feed them. Is that good for their own becoming? Because they're growing up with this belief that need white people to provide them resources, to provide them land, to provide them food to survive. That's not good for them, right? That's really bad for them. And it actually turns them into parasites, which is really bad for them on, the scale of the soul and the universe, to turn a whole race into a parasite. Because once you're a parasite, you can never develop it on your own anymore. You're always constantly looking for somebody else to feed off of, right? For your own survival. So that's really not good to be doing this, for white people to be doing this to the other races, helping them, giving them our lands, giving them our jobs, giving them food and stuff like that. It's really not good for them. So that would be rational racism, is to stop helping them so much. Yeah, sure, you can help people when they're in distress, but you cannot help them to the extent that you turn them into a parasite. That's not fair for them, and it's not good for you. So cognitive, and you're not being inherently hateful. Yeah, sure, you can hate, and you can hate. It's okay to hate bad things that are incompatible about other races, that are incompatible with your race. It's totally okay to hate that, but it's not inherently hateful. You're hating things that are worth hating, right? And so you're cognizant of differences, and you try to maintain reciprocity. And of course, making other people, turning other races into parasites, that's not being reciprocal, right? That's not good for them. So irrational racism or antisocial racism, that would be saying all races are equal. That would be saying there's no inherent differences, or differences should be eradicated and denied and ignored. Other cultures should be wiped out or enslaved. So it's kind of like a bigoted hatred, and it generates parasitism, and it's just not good. So there is obviously a bad form of racism. So what we want is to be pro-social, rational, racist for your own race, because the purpose of your own race is not to help other races, right? It just isn't. You can help other people for sure, but you cannot help to the other point that you turn another race into a parasite, because now you have not helped them. You've in fact hurt them really badly, right? Yeah. And it can happen that some groups are very antisocial. Like, you can find other races of humans which are very antisocial, very nasty. They're just like scammers. They're never cooperative. They're always just trying to hurt you and steal from you. And yeah, when you find a group like that, then yeah, you don't want to cooperate with them. And there's a large amount of history to be discussed there. But there are certainly some nasty races out there. And you generally just don't want to have anything to do with them. Okay, so the point was to get to this slide here. So here basically we could define Earth and all the monads and all of the frequencies which are interacting with Earth. You could define with this equation here. And so I had some new information come in about the state of Earth, but I'm not going to share this because, I don't know, it's a big idea. It's actually a really trivial idea. It's simple. It's obvious if you understand this equation. I mean, what is said here can be proven and is proven and supported by ontological mathematics. But what is said here, and it's an idea which has never existed on Earth before, but it is a new idea which is now directing Earth. But it just might seem a little bit too crazy. Even though it's a simple and trivial idea, and an obvious idea, and I'm just not going to share it. So sorry that I did that to you guys. But yeah, so let's just skip that one. So back to the whole idea of equality versus quality and souls. So souls are equal only in the sense of potential, that we can all eventually become God. That could become God, and only in what they're made of, right? But that's only an abstract equality, like saying we all have skin or we're all made of energy, right? So, I mean, it's not that substantive to insist that everything is just equal, right? Like it's just not true, right? Souls are not equal in actualization, so that means in how far along they have solved their function there, made that messy function we saw earlier be a nice, smooth function. So souls are not equal in that process. Yeah, sure, many are similar, but there's differences, right? And those differences are what are important. So the bodies they acquire and use and maintain are not equal, right? So souls get different bodies, and those bodies are not equal, right? Souls cannot maintain bodies equally, depending on their level of actualization, their level of power, and their ability to control matter. And souls cannot use bodies equally, right? Some souls come in and they're Olympic athletes and they can do insane things in the Olympics that some of us just marvel at, right? So that is a skill that a soul has developed, right? That not all souls have. Because souls are not equal in development and actualization, that means that they are not equal in the quality of the body, which they can acquire as well, right? And so soul's expression of mind is therefore not equal. Not all are equally intelligent, and we have unequal interests, right? We're not all interested in being an Olympian, right? The souls which were interested in being an Olympian chose the bodies which allowed them to be able to do that in this lifetime, right? So did you not see right away long ago when Hockney explained basic ontological mathematics in the God series over 15 years ago how racially oriented Illuminism and Hyperboreanism and ontological mathematics would have to work out to be? So that was very obvious to me at the beginning, and I even wrote that to them and said, and back then I was, a typical liberal university student, so in a very liberal environment, and I wrote that to them, and I'm like, it kind of seems like this would lead to racism. Now that I'm older, everybody becomes more racially aware and conscious when I get older. Now it makes perfect sense, and then just being convinced by the mathematics. I mean, now it's mathematically proven. So now that I'm convinced by the mathematics of it, it's like, yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that, actually. There's actually nothing wrong with it at all. So there's no evidence that all races and all people or men and women are equal. So just think about it. Where's your evidence? So there's no metaphysical evidence. There's no ontological mathematical evidence, right? The math does not show that you can just say that everything is equal. There's no math evidence to show that, no metaphysical evidence, and certainly no empirical evidence. There's just simply no evidence, right? So this is a mind virus. It's an emotional mind virus to make you irrational. From one of the parasite species currently living here, they introduced this idea and foisted it all upon us just to make us retarded and stupid. It is the differences between us which are effectual, which make life and history, and most importantly, which drives the dialectic. So that's just another word we use for the becoming of the soul and for the evolution of the universe towards becoming a perfected state like God. That's the dialectic, right? So that's what's important, is our differences, right? That's what reality is about. And there's just no evidence. There's really just no evidence in anywhere. All it is a statement. All it is a statement that people say, but it has no evidence. So, I don't know. Like get over the whole equality thing. Just get over it, right? And that doesn't mean you need to be mean and hateful, but just get over it. So equality before the law is useful. So that's useful, right? Having equality before the law, but that's equality for laws. Equality so that laws apply to each of us equally. That's useful. That concept of equality is useful, right? But that doesn't translate to saying everybody is actually fundamentally equal, right? In our metrics and in our qualities and in our mind and in our heart, our spirit, our intelligence, our physical abilities, right? Equality before, that's not what it means. And people seem to get so confused by that, right? Literal equality in all metrics, that's the height of mental illness, right? Do we all have the same equal personality types? Like the Myers-Briggs personality types, are they all equal? Why would you even say that? That statement doesn't even make sense. If you want to say we're all equal, well, then you're saying that all the Myers-Briggs personality types are equal. But the whole existence of them is predicated on them not being equal. So what do you mean that everything is equal when there's this thing we call personality types, which are by definition not equal, right? So get over this whole emotional draw to this equality thing and appreciate that there are differences in quality. And your role is to love quality, love the form of the good. You want to love good, beautiful, becoming things over the nasty things, right? I mean, why is it such a difficult concept? Well, obviously poor people have been so psychologically abused, it seems like. So some things in the God series by Cockney et al. Books were not exactly correct. In order to debate, possibly discuss in the future. One thing that I think was incorrect is they did discuss in their literature sort of sexual liberation. I think that the experiment with sexual liberation has been a failure for white people. I think there's more value, it seems, in chastity, in monogamous marriage for the sake of the family and stable families. It seems like there's some value there. I mean, we could maybe discuss it, but we've been running the experiment, and the experiment, of of just sexual freedom, and it just seems like people are hurting each other more than it's helping. People are losing a lot of money, in divorce, right? It costs a lot of money, and children are losing, their inheritance. And yeah, there is some value. I know they're pretty anti-inheritance in the writing, but in this state, of the world, God, why wouldn't you want to give your child some inheritance? What, you want them to have equal opportunity to what in this current world? To what? To work at Burger King? Like, no, you know what I mean? So anyway, that's a lot of stuff to get into. This has already gone on too long. So, racial competition, the state of the world. European white people are in a race war, a global race war, which they're not fighting in because they believe that it's their responsibility to support the rest of the world while the rest of the world is trying to destroy them, right? So, poor white people, we need to get over it and start defending ourselves. And we have mathematical justification for why we should do so now. Global war is against white people. And why? Because we encode Illuminism. Because this process of becoming and wanting to become more perfect and become like God and become, a perfected and just a continually perfecting species, race, right? Whereas the other races have a much harder time with that because they're so parasitical amongst themselves, and now they're parasitizing off of us and really holding us back, right? So what's not about bringing in ontological meritocracy, right? All of the immigrant invasion of the various countries in Europe, that's not helping. That's not doing anything for meritocracy. That's just destroying them, right? It's just a parasitical system to bring in Islam and other stupid religions and scamming type cultures and races. And yes, scamming is a racial quality among the races, right? White people generally very low on the scamming metric. Other races like Indians, Jews, very, very high on the tendency to scam, and it is a racial feature. It's not just individual. It seems to be a racial feature among some races. And anyway, white people really don't like scamming. Other cultures, other races are totally fine with it and love it, right? So anyway, they're not bringing Europe a good future. Why would you think something like that? So Illuminism is European because it's based on the European intellectual tradition, culminating in mathematical definitions, obviously, for all of our positions. So what is meritocracy? What is ontological mathematics? What is Illuminism? White people discovering the planet and giving Stone Age peoples European civilization. But as I said, maybe that was a mistake because maybe that wasn't for them. Maybe that was not their trajectory. It's kind of like a prime directive type thing from Star Trek. Should you actually do that, it's not necessarily going to be good for them. And if you give them technology that's just as powerful as your technology, well, they might use it against you because they might have different ideas about sharing. They're not into just sharing. They will want to take you back over completely. And so that's what's so dangerous, actually, about just sharing your technology and your civilization with other lesser developed races, species. So yeah, giving is one thing, but making them dependent on you, turning them into a parasite on you, is turning yourself into a slave. But then they might also develop enough power to overpower you and destroy you. So the prime directive is actually about self-defense. It's not actually about withholding offensiveness. It's actually about self-defensiveness is what the prime directive is actually about. That's a valid concept. So we are there. We are through it. So if you want to support me and my work and my continued writing and producing these videos, here is a Monero address. Just use an exchange to exchange your Bitcoin to Monero and then send it to this address. Monero is obviously private, and so once you convert to Monero, the nasty spy agencies and whoever else, if you want to be a schizophrenic paranoid, not that I am really, but they have a much harder time tracking it through Monero. Not that I'm even doing anything illegal. I'm just doing it because, I don't know, just why not, for fun, right? It's not like what I'm doing is illegal or anything. It needs to be anonymous. I just think it should be, well, and just because the current people running the financial system of the world are massive parasites who are using that information, how you're transferring and spending money. They're just using that to data mine you and make money off you and enslave you and do stupid things with your life, right? So that's why it should be anonymous. So that's the basic idea there. Here's my series of books. This Illuminism one I referenced a whole bunch of times. I'm going to write a second edition where it's expanded and some of the concepts are described in a little bit more depth. This first edition is still good to read. And so there's my channels, there's my Amazon address. And so yeah, so I hope you guys like that, and I hope you all have a good day, and take care, and bye-bye.